Well, thank you, Bob, and really appreciate the warm welcome and introduction. And should remind you at any point in time, we're always looking for volunteers to help do greeting and welcoming as part of it. And Bob does a fantastic job, and I know some others on here have done it for us as well as part of it. Anytime, email arpnd@arp.org. We'd be happy to have you help us out. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Josh Yaskvig. I'm the state director for AARP North Dakota, and super glad that you joined us for the Bismarck Briefing today, which is all about roundabouts. And so we're going to be, as you heard from Bob, joined shortly by Mark Berg, who's the traffic engineer for the city of Bismarck, and Mike Watson, who's the director of the AARP Livable Communities work. But before I introduce our guests, we do have a poll question to help set the stage. And we're going to throw the poll question up here, and Janelle is going to work on that in the background. And so the quick question is, do you think roundabouts make driving easier or worse, or are you unsure? And as you're answering that question, and just click the answer on your screen and then click that blue submit button on the bottom. And as you're answering that question, just want to give you a quick reminder. Bismarck is the first community in North Dakota to join the AARP network of age-friendly states and communities. The AARP Livable Communities Initiative and the network of age-friendly communities work nationwide to support the efforts of neighborhoods, towns, cities, and entire states to be livable for people of all ages. And so with that background in mind, and you all answering the poll, we'll get to that in a second, I want to get started with today's briefing. And again, it's about roundabouts, or circular intersections that move traffic counterclockwise around a central island, and they can help reduce traffic-related deaths and injuries. And as you'll find out, sometimes it does pay to drive around in circles as we do that. But let me first welcome Mark Berg. Mark is the city traffic engineer. Mark, do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about who you are?
Thanks, Josh. As Josh said, my name is Mark Berg. I've been the traffic engineer for the city of Bismarck for about 22 years. Prior to that, I had about 15, 17 years in with the North Dakota DOT in traffic engineering. I love what I do because it's always changing. And not many people can say that their job doesn't change on a daily basis.
Absolutely. So, and Mark and I have a history. When I was in a different role, in a different position, I got to work with Mark very closely. So we're super excited to hear from him in a bit. Also with us today is another friend of mine, Mike Watson, who heads up the AARP Livable Communities Programs work. Mike, good to see you as always. How are you today?
Good to see you, Josh. Doing well. Pleasure to be here with y'all.
Excellent. You want to tell them a little bit more about who you are, Mike?
Yeah, so it's great to be here. And so I'm AARP's Director of Livable Communities Programs, where we work kind of very closely with AARP state offices across the country, including here in North Dakota, and others in neighboring states to help work and partner with local leaders and residents to help make communities more livable for all ages. So the team that I lead, we provide support and technical assistance, grants, and other publications and resources to help jumpstart and accelerate change across the country like we're talking about today. So again, really glad to be here and looking forward to hearing from folks with questions and others.
Well, thank you both for being here. And again, a special thanks to our greeter for this event, Bob Entringer. Again, if you're interested in helping out with these online events, please let us know by sending us an email at arpnd@arp.org. So before I turn it over to Mark to talk a little bit about the pop-up demonstration that happened in Bismarck, I do want to show the poll results. Janelle, can you put the poll results up for people to see as part of it? And so 80% of those who answered today think that roundabouts make driving easier, and 20% said they weren't sure. So the good news is nobody said worse, Mark. So that's good news, and Mike. But there's still some education, I think, to do and some additional work to do on that. And so with that, we're going to start with Mark Berg. As I said, Mark said he's the city traffic engineer and has had a lot of time and studies. I can tell you this man knows the streets of Bismarck and the traffic patterns of Bismarck probably by memory by now, because there are many times where I'd call Mark and ask him about a street and he'd say, oh yeah, we see X, Y, and Z on that as well. And Mark was instrumental in setting up the pop-up demonstration on a roundabout over on 16th Street and Rosser. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to give a little presentation and talk a little bit about what we did over there and what we learned and what future learnings might be applied. So Mark, I'll turn it over to you and you can go ahead and share your screen and take it away.
Thank you, Josh. The way the city of Bismarck got involved in this is in 2019, the MPO, Metropolitan Planning Organization, did an intersection analysis study of about 65 intersections in the Bismarck-Mandan area. One of the criteria that we asked the consultant to develop was a roundabout demonstration project for that we could temporarily set up and try just get the response from the public as to what they thought about the roundabout. All of a sudden, we were approached by AARP through about their livable community, and the two couldn't have fit together much better because we already had this intersection in mind at 16th and Rosser to do that, and with the aid of AARP, we were able to kick this project off and just to see what the public was doing. Okay. Right now, for those who aren't.
Mark,
yes,
are you sharing your screen? Because it's not showing up. So if you had intended to, or if maybe you're not there yet. I just wanted to let you know we're not seeing it.
I am sharing my screen, so.
Can you try it? And maybe I'm not seeing. Janelle, are you seeing it? I don't mean to put you on the spot. I just want to make sure as you're going through your slides, people can see them. So.
No, I can't see it either.
Can you try and reshare it, Mark? Hit that green button on the bottom again. Sorry, all. I just thought it'd be important. He's got some really good slides that I think help tell this story. So, and we tested this before. This is when technology happens.
Okay.
You want Janelle, Mark? There we go. There we go. There you go. Yep. Now if you can put it in presentation mode, we're good to go. So.
Okay. Well, the existing conditions for those of you who are not from the Bismarck area is this was a four-way stop intersection. The traffic volumes on each approach were about 5,000 a day. We did have some crashes, which you normally wouldn't anticipate with a four-way stop condition, but you can see there 23% of them were the right angle or rear end, 21% at right angle, and then 38% were the angle accident, typically involving left turns. So what we did is we laid out what we thought we could actually temporarily put together for the intersection to remove the existing four-way stops and create a roundabout type intersection. Wrong direction. We went out there with our public works staff and picked on 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, and we actually established the roundabout. It was quite interesting to be standing out in the street as traffic approached because they had no clue what they were driving into. Once we got all the signage and stuff up, we actually stood out there and directed some of the traffic through the intersection because this is the only roundabout within the city limits of Bismarck that has ever been tried. You can see here, you know, as you approach it, you would see the roundabout sign announcing that that's what you're going into. But the definition that Josh gave earlier of what a roundabout is was very good because a lot of people pulled up, they stopped, they were confused, they didn't know what to do. But roundabouts are very intuitive to themselves, and the public actually caught on very quickly. One of the things that we really wanted to do was to gather information on how the public perceived a roundabout. So we put together a series of questions and put a survey on our website. As you left the roundabout and you were about a half a block away, you could see the sign that I've got up on the screen right now that said, take the survey. And we had over 800 responses, and this was only in place for about 2 weeks. Some of the questions we asked was, how did you pass through it? Were you driving? As a pedestrian, what did you think? As a driver, what did you think? What you felt overall about roundabouts, and what you would feel about as making this a permanent change. The results were quite interesting. For the first question, the majority were driving. As a pedestrian, how they felt. Pedestrians or roundabouts are not really that pedestrian friendly. They can be made, but understanding when we put this in, it's a temporary situation. We couldn't go out and remark crosswalks. We couldn't go out and do a lot of things that we would do if you were to make a permanent roundabout. So doing the temporary roundabout had some drawbacks. What their experience was, and you can see it was about 2 to 1 for negative experience versus a positive experience. And part of that is what we attributed to change. If you get used to something, change is not really acceptable. But but the amazing thing is, but overall is they were about 50-50 as far as negative to positive on how they felt about roundabouts. That kind of was unusual to us. The permanent change was not making this into a permanent roundabout. And the biggest thing is, because as part of the survey, you were allowed to give comments, and we got a lot of comments, and they just didn't feel it was necessary to put a roundabout here. They weren't against it, just not at this location. Like I said, the results about 50-50 as far as whether they liked it or didn't like it. Some of the comments we received is the circle was too small, it was at a poor location, and that the four-way stop works fine. Now, as you showed in your survey, a pop-up survey, Josh, we had a lot of positive comments. The biggest thing is I didn't have to stop. And that people really like. And a lot of them said that, it works better than a four-way stop, and simply because of that. As far as like the circle too small, I stood out there for hours and I watched a guy go through with a full-length pickup pulling a 30-foot pontoon and had no issues. It's just that, you could have done it better. So, a couple of things we learned, and this is kind of geeky on my part as far as a traffic engineer, is the response tool that we used really, really was effective. Things I would have done different is what we call providing positive guidance, using larger physical barriers. The candlesticks are sometimes hard to see and hard to judge distance. We would have made better accommodations for the pedestrians. But going back, the online survey tool that we created was, we had a great public response. I've done a lot of public hearings. Josh, you've attended a lot of public hearings. You get 20 people. Here we had 800 over a 2-week period. The one other thing that we should have done a better job of, and that was public education. Telling people what a roundabout was, putting a, some type of public service announcements like we do on other things, but we just kind of threw this out there and just to see how people would react. I guess, Would I do it again? Yes. Would I do it different? Yes. But with the help of AARP, we got a chance to kick this thing off the ground. And I can't say thank you enough, because that it gave me so much more information as to, where we would do roundabouts and things of that nature.
Well, thank you, Mark, and really appreciate that rundown as part of it. And I think this last slide is the most important part, and part of why. And this is a good transition as Mark prepares to take down his slides as part of it, about why we and ARP is big on test and learn, and on the Community Challenge Grant program, which was part of what funded this. We actually, the city of Bismarck got a Community Challenge Grant to do a park development that's right next to this intersection, part of it. And then as part of their original request that didn't get funded, but then we came back and funded, was this roundabout demonstration project. So we were trying to partner multiple things in this intersection to test and see what works. And so it's a good transition to Mike Watson. And I see the question in the chat. Keep the questions coming in the chat. We'll get to them in a second, but I think it'd be helpful for Mike to give his presentation, and then we can jump into questions there. And so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mike Watson to talk a little bit about, we heard about what happened locally and what we've done testing and learning, and talk about connecting it to the bigger picture of how roundabouts fit in to the bigger picture of livable communities, and why we do test and learn projects like this. So Mike.
It's great. Thank you, Josh. And Mark, thanks for that presentation as well. It was really great to see all the thought and effort you went into get public engagement. Before I start proceeding, I just want to confirm, can everybody see my screen?
We got you, Mike.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of some of ARP's thinking around roundabouts, but start with kind of a little bit of a grounding of why we care about livable communities, and kind of focus in on some of the benefits that we see broadly with roundabouts, and also talk a little bit about some of the myths, some of which Mark kind of mentioned in some of the feedback that we got from folks. The first thing, which is something I think everybody on this call knows, and this is one of the reasons why ARP works on livable communities and works to ensure that communities are livable for all ages, is this fact you see right here on the screen. Again, it's something you all know. The vast majority of people in this country, we're about to release some survey data in the next couple of days that just reinforces this number on the screen. Roughly 8 in 10 people over the age of 50 want to remain in their communities and in their homes as they age. And that actually is pretty consistent across all ages. When you look at people over the age of 18, it's very similar. So it is a consistent theme that we hear. While you always hear the stories of people moving to Texas and moving to Florida and moving to Arizona, by and large, most people want to remain in their communities as they age. And that's why we need leadership like Mark talked about from the city of Bismarck on how to help people remain in their communities and ensure that there are safe transportation options and others. We also know that when you build a community that's structured around those needs and is going to allow people to remain in their community as they age, you're going to create a community that is great for everybody. We kind of talk about how if you build a community that's great for an 80-year-old, it's going to be great for an 8-year-old, and it's going to be great for everybody in between. There are very common needs that folks have. And with that, we also see that when it comes to transportation modes, while people place a lot of value on walkability and have high desire and high needs for safe, walkable streets, the vast majority of people in this country, especially older adults, still get around by driving. I know this is an experience that many of you watching today are probably very familiar with. Again, we're getting around by walking, we're having others driving us, but by and large, 85%, almost 90% of people are getting around by driving. So what does that mean? It means that as people age, we know that the average person over the age of 65 is going to outlive their ability to drive by 6 to 10 years. So it means we have to ensure that our streets, our roads, and our vehicles are designed to allow people to age in place and still get around their communities. So we see that also with that, I mentioned walkability. Walkability is an important issue for older adults for a few reasons. One is safety. An older adult is more than 50% more likely to be severely injured or killed if they're struck by a vehicle while walking than a younger person is. At the same time, we also see that intersections are risky places for all drivers, but particularly older adults. roughly 40% of car crashes that involve drivers over the age of 65 occur at intersections. So if there are things that we can do from a design perspective, again, I'm talking about some of the things that Mark just went through, there to limit that, we'll have a community that's better designed for people of all ages. So with that, I want to talk a little bit more about some roundabouts. I think one of the first things we see that Mark mentioned is roundabouts are going to reduce vehicle speeds. And that's a good thing, frankly. I think we all are used to wanting to get places faster. But when we reduce vehicle speeds through high traffic areas where there's a lot of pedestrians, we're reducing the risk of somebody being struck and killed by a vehicle. We're reducing the risk of vehicles running into objects as well as pedestrians. So we see that, and we also see up to a 90% drop in personal injuries and fatalities and roundabouts compared to typical intersections. So a really significant improvement in pedestrian safety when roundabouts are installed. We also see that while roundabouts reduce vehicle speeds, they also reduce traffic delays and improve traffic flow. So a roundabout can handle roughly between 30 to 50% more traffic than a conventional intersection, and folks are going to be able to move through quicker. There is always that kind of needing to get familiar with it and needing to get used to it, but once implemented and in the community for a long time, they're able to reduce the delays in traffic and help things move a little bit faster. And again, cause people to drive just a little bit slower and prioritize safety. We also see that roundabouts, when put in place properly, can help create a sense of place. When designed, they can be aesthetically pleasing and invite people. And also when put around busy developments or businesses or other neighborhoods, they can reduce noise from cars as well, making it just a little bit more pleasant to be outside rather than listening to the sound of cars whizzing by at very high speeds. So with some of the benefits, I also want to talk about some of the myths that we see around roundabouts. One of the myths, I think, is that it's going to hurt businesses. And we see this, as I mentioned earlier, see this in kind of is proven wrong in several ways. First of all, it's going to reduce noise around businesses, making it more pleasant to be. And also when we're slowing down the speeds at which cars drive and making it a little bit easier to get out, walk, and go visit businesses, we're going to see an increase in traffic. For example, in Golden, Colorado, retail sales increased 60% after the addition of a string of roundabouts throughout the community. And this was looking back to roughly the 90s, but this was during a recession. So seeing sales increase during that time, during a recession, was really, I think, a really important data point from this. And it also outpaced the sales of other communities throughout the state that had not installed roundabouts. We also hear this myth that roundabouts aren't good for older adults, but we see that roundabouts have the ability to reduce these front end and right angle crashes, which are very deadly for people. And as I mentioned earlier, older adults are at more serious risk of injuries as a pedestrian or a driver when a vehicle. And when collisions do occur, they're typically going to be at lower speeds. And on Mark's point, he mentioned that there was some negative kind of initial feelings about it as folks were just getting used to the experience of a roundabout. But we also see that education and familiarity can help increase comfort. So those numbers Mark mentioned, in similar places, we've seen that those numbers will flip from a kind of opposition to roughly 70% of people supporting and wanting more roundabouts after they get more used to them. So again, this is borne out in experiences that other communities have had across the country, again, in communities of all sizes. So with that, those are some of the benefits. Those are some of the myths that we see. And I also we just got a great overview of how roundabouts are being tested in this community, gathering input and kind of testing the traffic flow, but also just want to highlight some of the successes that we've seen in other places. So in Anchorage, Alaska, and in other communities, through our AARP's grant program, the AARP Community Challenge, we've been able to support projects that are built around and designed around testing roundabouts throughout the community. So up on the screen, you see an example in Anchorage where they were able to gather public input on the day of. And also you can see examples just like you had here, testing traffic flow, testing how it is for pedestrians to cross the street during a roundabout installation. And ultimately, this grant was in 2019, and ultimately this then led to the permanent installation of a roundabout based on the input that the city gathered and the partners gathered during that test. and again, led to a permanent installation of a roundabout that has had public support since it's been installed. So with that, we also see that there are ways that communities are testing and learning on this all the time. And as Josh said, AARP wants to support communities as you are looking to test new things. And we have a few ways to do that. One is through the grant program I mentioned, the AARP Community Challenge, and Josh mentioned as well. And also AARP state offices like North Dakota and other states are providing grants to communities to support this test and learn model. Also, one of the pieces I mentioned was around education and ensuring folks know how to navigate roundabouts. AARP Driver Safety has courses that help educate people on the basics of navigating a roundabout and can help you get a little bit more comfortable. And then finally, we have a website, it's aarp.org/livable, that has gobs of resources and toolkits and publications online to help people learn a bit more about what it means to have a street that's designed to integrate roundabouts, integrate pedestrians, and integrate other road users as well. So with that, I'm really looking forward to questions and turn it back to you, Josh.
Hey, thank you, Mike, and great chock full information presentations from both of you, and I think a really good demonstration of why we do test and learn, and that we're not the only ones that are doing this. I laughed when Mike shared his presentation. We had an advanced copy of both Mike and Mark's presentation, and originally when I saw Mike's presentation, I thought it was a photo of the intersection, because for a second I thought it was the 16th Street Park, just from a different angle of what Mark had showed. And then I read the top of the slide and saw that it was Anchorage, Alaska as part of it. So I think it's great to share. So we do have a couple of questions in the chat. And if you have others, you can feel free to put them in the chat, or I will invite you to take yourself off of mute here in a second if you want to ask it verbally. But the first question we have in the chat, and I don't know which one of you wants to answer this. Maybe I'll pitch it to you first, Mark, and then if Mike has anything to add. The question is, explain the turn signal requirement for roundabouts. For example, do I always use my right turn signal, or do you signal in a roundabout?
By law, you should be using your turn signal. As you approach the roundabout, you would put on your left turn signal indicating that you're going to go into the roundabout, because a lot of them have, if you're going to make a right turn, you're not really entering fully the roundabout itself. You're typically right turn doesn't have a significant amount of impact to the traffic. The one I'm most familiar with is the one up on 1804 North Washington Street, where they have exclusive right turn lanes in the roundabout. And so, you know, people that are sitting waiting to enter the roundabout have an idea of what you as a driver are going to do. So as you would say, northbound on Washington Street, approaching 1804, if you signal for a left, that means you're entering the roundabout and you're going to go around at least past the east approach. If you turn on your right turn signal, you would indicate that you're going to just use the exclusive right turn lane. And when you get ready to leave the roundabout, you signal for a right turn that you're actually going to exit the circle itself. But that is a requirement, is to use your turn signals around. A lot of people aren't familiar with that.
Thank you, Mark, for that. That's super helpful. Mike, anything to add?
Nothing to add. I think Mark, the traffic engineer, said it very well.
I assumed you would say that. So, Mark, this one is specific for you then, and it's in reference to North Washington and 43rd Ash Cooley and this is a popular intersection right near Horizon School and some of that. And so can you talk about, the question is, was there any thought to roundabouts at that intersection or along 43rd or any of that as part of that? And I will preempt this question because I want to add on to it. I know there was, you can talk about what is the status of that, but is there any discussion, because I believe 43rd east of 83/State Street is due to be constructed here in the next year or two. And so are there discussions about roundabouts there as well? So two-part question. First, talk about 43rd Ash Cooley, Washington, and then talk about the rest of 43rd as you move east along that corridor, if you could.
Well, first of all, when we in 2015, 2014, when we first started looking at that North Washington Street project, we did look at roundabouts at 43rd and Washington. But when we started doing future traffic projections, there is a limit to the amount of capacity that a roundabout can have. And in our 20-year projections, it exceeded the capabilities of actually using a roundabout. We could have constructed a roundabout for today's traffic, but in the future, we would have ended up reconstructing the intersection to put in traffic signals. So from an economic standpoint, it made much more sense to go with a traffic signal system. One of the things when you talked about moving on to your next question concerning the east of US 83, we looked at roundabouts. That was we actually require our consultants to look at them to tell us, what we want. And then we bring the analysis forward to the Board of City Commissioners. You were involved in that end of it, Josh, where, what do you want us to build? The roundabouts, I think they're a great thing. I've driven through a lot of them. But, the decision was made west of 83 not to, and that had to do something with the fire station and the steep grade at Lockport not being real conducive to a roundabout, and mixing the traffic control a block apart really doesn't do well for traffic movements. So you had a signal at Coleman, and then you'd add a roundabout at Lockport, Ottawa, and then a signal just to the east of there, probably 700-800 feet onto US 83. So it was probably a better decision to go that way. Where when you get east of State Street, there's a roundabout planned at 19th and 43rd, which is more than half a mile away. So, it lends itself to it. And then to continue the pattern of using roundabout, 26th Street also made sense.
Yep, absolutely. So thank you for that, Mark, and appreciate that. My question, a question on this, and then there's another question in the chat that will change subject, but just to follow up on this, is the issue of roundabouts east of 83 closed, or is that still yet to be determined?
That has been determined. We are reaching 90% plan completion right now, because we're going to try to bid it in February of 2022 to begin construction in April of 2022, or as early as frost will allow us.
So thank you for that, Mark, clarification. And for those of you watching, as you know, part of the ARP enrollment in the ARP network of age-friendly communities, the city is undergoing a Together 2045 plan, which will talk about land use, and part of land use is street design and street concepts going forward. And so just wanted to know about that specific section, but there will be other places to provide input about roundabouts as well, and we'll certainly keep you informed either through these briefings or other opportunities. The next question then is, and I'll pitch it to whichever one of you wants to, is if traffic is busy at a roundabout, does the person trying to enter yield to those already going around? Who wants to take that one? Mark, why don't you start, and then Mike can.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yes, as you're entering into the circle, you yield to the traffic that's already there. You're waiting for a gap to enter into. The easiest way I found to drive them is if you approach the roundabout at a lower speed and do a judgment for your gap, because if you can slip in between two vehicles already in there, if there's enough space and stuff, you can easily slip in and slip right back out. If you're going to continue around to make a, essentially making a left turn, you would just slip in and then continue to slip out, which that's why the roundabout is designed that way, is so nobody has to physically stop. So, as a driver, and you get used to driving, you adjust your approach speeds to take advantage of those gaps.
So Mark, and this is a follow-up. Mike, first of all, Mike, did you have anything to add on that?
No, I think again, Mark answered it very well. The one thing I would add is just a note around, being kind of aware of pedestrians as we enter roundabouts as well, right? I think you see some very well designed roundabouts that are going to have crosswalks, highly identified, visible flashers to ensure that drivers and motorists, as they're approaching, are aware of potentially crossing pedestrians as well. So while you're trying to find your gap to get in between cars, also looking out and having an eye for other road users as well.
So, Mike, you literally led me into what my follow-up question was going to be, which is, who has the right of way in a roundabout, a pedestrian or a car?
Well, Mark, go ahead.
Well, because you're encountering the pedestrian prior to entering the roundabout, obviously the pedestrian would have the right of way. We took that into account when we looked at 19th and 43rd here in Bismarck on our newest design. We anticipate, we always design with trails included in our federal aid projects. You're well aware of that, Josh, but we also looked at, we're making trail connections from US 83 all the way over to the Hay Creek Trail. So that played an integral part on how we address the pedestrians through especially the 19th Street, 43rd Avenue roundabout.
Awesome. So, Mike, this one is for you. We have another question. You had mentioned the ARP Safe Driver classes, and appreciate you doing that. We have a great partnership with the ARP Safe Driver program here in North Dakota, and Pete Kuhn, who is our state director, does a wonderful job, and I know he's looking forward to, when it's safe and able to do so, to get back to doing some in-person classes. Is there a class specific to roundabouts, or is it just embedded in the classes themselves?
I'm fairly certain that it is embedded within the classes and the recent curriculum update they did in past years, but there's also content available online. So if you just Google ARP driver safety roundabout or enter that into your search engine, there's a couple kind of short quizzes and online content that'll pop right up that can give you kind of a basic, very quick kind of a snippet of what it's like to enter a roundabout and some of the basic rules of the road. But again, the standard AARP Safe Driver course will have information on roundabouts.
Thank you for that, and great input. I'm literally putting in the chat there's an article from November of 2020 that then links to other information as well. But there's an article that describes a roundabout, and then there's a video at the bottom of that I just put in the chat to everybody, so you can open your chat and find that there as well. So one other question, and this is probably for both Mike and Mark, is part of it, and I'll start with you, Mike. So as part of the community challenge grant, so you didn't fund the roundabout part, we did, but we always share information and feed it back and forth, and we would have never found out about the roundabout without the community challenge grant program funding the other project as part of it to be able to fund it. And so my question here is going, what do you do with this information? How do you take a look at that across the country and use that to provide input or feedback for communities? And just talk a little bit about more how you absorb that. And then as you're answering that, Mark, I'm just going to tee you up. My question for you then is, okay, you have this information and this data. How are you using it then to inform some of the learnings and things you're learning to apply here locally? So wondering how we apply the learnings globally and then locally. Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, and Josh, it's one of the great things about the ARP Community Challenge program in that it is designed for communities of all sizes. Roughly 40% of our grants have gone to rural communities, and 40% have gone to urban communities, and 20% have gone to suburban communities. So it's designed in a way that any community of any size and any type can apply for a grant and learn. And we see, which is what you alluded to, it's a fantastic way to test and learn for communities to have that they have an idea, they want to make a little bit of progress, receive a little bit of funding to jumpstart that effort, and it's part of a broader plan. And one of the things we've been really focused on over the last several years is how do we, exactly what you said, gathering up those stories and really best practice examples that we've seen and sharing them with communities across the country. So every year we go out and we do probably 15 to 20 different video projects. We write articles about grantees. We do follow-up after action reports and more. And we know that because of these, as a result of grants, roughly 45% of folks who receive a grant are able to leverage it to attract additional funding for their effort. Roughly 80% are able to leverage it to overcome some policy barriers in the community and build support for policy change or permanent installations of a temporary test like we saw here in Bismarck and Anchorage, like I showed before. And then roughly just under 100% of grantees say that it helps to increase awareness and engagement. So we're kind of always looking to find the new cutting edge ideas, both on kind of the big things that the big city focused people get really excited about, and also some of the really tiny innovations that are very easily replicable across the country when it comes to public engagement, when it comes to tests, just like we saw here. Josh, you noted that the example we shared from Anchorage looked very familiar to what you saw here. So it's really good to see more and more communities undertaking similar projects and replicating things that have been proven and tested already.
Awesome. Thank you for that, Mike. Mark, what about locally?
Locally, what we got out of this project was, are the citizens of Bismarck willing to accept the implementation of a roundabout? In addition to that is how we can make it better, more acceptable. Simple things like educating people as to that have not experienced a roundabout, what things we need to take a look at. In the case of 16th Street and Rosser, we need to put more time and effort into considering pedestrian usage. Like I said, we gathered a lot of the comments, and everybody had comments on their questions, which was also good to hear. That was just a secondary effect, was the public input. But is there places where we should be considering it, or we shouldn't be considering implementing a roundabout? And that helps us, because that was what, like I said, that was one of the biggest comments is, love roundabouts, not at this location. So we take it down to the level of, would we construct one of these? Yes. The public is willing to accept them. But where are they willing to accept them? And one of the things I failed to mention earlier in my presentation is, for a demographic standpoint, a lot of elderly people drove through this roundabout that we constructed, even though it wasn't the optimal roundabout, but they understood how to get through it. That was amazing. Because older drivers get blamed for not understanding. Well, they understood it.
That's great, Mark, and I appreciate you both. For those of you who are, and Mike just put something about referencing, reinforcing Mark's point about more people that use them tend to find. And I just, to bring that locally, I remember when people couldn't believe they put a roundabout in out on Highway 10, going out towards Lincoln, all that, and people love it now. Don't hear any disparaging comments about. I shouldn't say people love it. My experiences, people have shared with me they enjoy it now. So we do have a few more minutes to ask questions, and we are going to stop the program because sometimes I know some of you don't like to ask questions when we're doing the recording and the live broadcast here in just a second. But before we do that, I want to just wrap up this live part as part of it, and want to first of all say again, thank you to Mark, thank you to Mike. I also want to make sure I say thank you to Alexis and Janelle and Marnie, who are in the background doing things. Special kudos to Alexis Betts. She's been our intern since May of this year and done a lot of work getting our livable communities work stood up in Bismarck and organized. And she's leaving us here shortly because she's going to be graduating. So I don't get many more opportunities to thank her. And if she was on camera, you'd all see her blushing right now as part of it. But she's done great work, and thanks to her. So before we close out and turn off the recording, so if anybody has any questions they didn't want to ask, Mike, because I have you on camera, anything else you want to add or close with?
I just want to say I want to commend you, Josh, and your team and the city of Bismarck for kind of prioritizing public engagement and education around roundabouts. I think we've seen, as we talked about today, the more people become familiar with them, the safer we're going to be in them, and the more public support will be. So again, want to commend you all for prioritizing, engaging people, and sharing this information. It's such a delight to be here today.
Thank you again, Mike. Mark, anything from you? And please hang on, because we are going to turn off the recording and make sure nobody has any other questions. Mark, anything from you?
Yeah, this was an opportunity for the city of Bismarck, and we were glad that AARP extended a hand to get us there. A lot of times, funding projects such as this is difficult. You were in the aspect of providing for that to us, and also, I have to extend a hand out to Katie Johnke from our Burley County nurses, and actually helping us put this whole program together, the two parts. The city of Bismarck had the one part, but she was able to include us in as part of that park project, and that was really great of her to do that. So thank you, Katie.
Awesome. Well, thank you both. And with that, we're going to remind you that if you're watching this on your YouTube channel, you found us at youtube.com/AARP North Dakota, where we live stream all of these. So if you missed us, you can go back and watch events always at youtube.com/AARP North Dakota, or you can find any of our upcoming events as well as the links to the recordings at aarp.org/ND events. Last thing before we turn off the live stream, for those of you attending live with us, you can watch for an email with a survey link where you can provide us our feedback. Really helpful to hear from you all about what you thought of today's programming, and if it was helpful, let us know so we can do more. With that, I want to thank you all for joining us for the